Hello, everyone. This is Mike History 2, and welcome to part 3 of What If the Ottomans Were Christian. So, of course, for part 1, you can check that out on my channel, how the Ottomans grow. Well, first of all, how the Ottomans become Christian and then grow into an empire. Although, spoiler alert, if you haven't already watched it, it's pretty much just the same as our timeline, except the Ottomans are Christian instead of Muslim. Episode 2 is on Julius's channel because this is a collaboration I'm doing with my friend Julius Caesar. I will have the links in the description and in the comments. And as far as I'm aware, almost nobody actually watched it, but it's really interesting. It talks about how a Christian Ottoman Empire would affect colonization. And so I would definitely recommend that you check that out. And then, with those two having been watched, I assume you've watched them by now, we can get to episode 3. So, we'll start in 1569 when the Ottomans will decide to colonize themselves and create the first colony in northern Sumatra. Now, the reason for this is because in our timeline, actually, the Ottomans actually did extend some sort of control over Indonesia, although this was indirect rule. But in this scenario, we will have them actually just colonizing it. 2 years later, in 1571, the Ottomans would still conquer Cyprus, and then things would be calm for a little bit. But in 1578, the second jihad against the Ottomans by the Safavids would start, and this would be a long, drawn-out war. But 12 years later, in 1590, it ends with neither side winning. On one hand, the Safavids would be motivated by revenge against the infidel Ottomans who control all three holy sites, but at the same time, this would be the peak of Ottoman power, and so it would result in the Safavids gaining nothing. However, this wouldn't stop the Safavids, and in 1603 they would launch their Third Jihad against the Ottomans, this time with the support of Morocco and, crucially, the Mughals. So by this time, the Mughals had securely established their control over a large part of South Asia. And with their massive and powerful army joining with the Safavids in the east and the Moroccans in the west, it would slowly grind down the Ottoman Empire until by 1618 the Third Jihad would end, with the Ottomans being forced to give up Iraq. And this would mark the end of the Ottoman Golden Age. This would essentially kind of be what the Great Turkish War was, or maybe not the Great Turkish War, but it would be kind of like Lepanto mixed with the Siege of Vienna. It would kind of be that kind of moment for the Ottomans, where it's not like they just collapse as an empire, but it would be the end of their golden age. Now, despite all this, of course, the Ottomans and Safavids in our timeline were never at peace, and in this timeline they wouldn't be either, and just 5 years later they would go to war again in the Fourth Jihad. Now this time, the Safavids, boosted by their recent victory over the Ottomans, would be insanely successful, and would actually reach the gates of Jerusalem. Now by this time, even though a lot of the Christian countries would not exactly be friendly to the Ottomans, either because of denominational differences or because the Ottomans had conquered a lot of their land, all Christians would realize that losing their most holy city once again to the Muslims would be unacceptable, and a crusade would be called against the Safavids. Now, large parts of southern and eastern Europe would join this crusade, and the Christians would arrive just in time to prevent Jerusalem from falling to Muslim hands. Now, this war would not at all be nice and peaceful. It would go on for a very long time, but by 1639, a decisive crusader battle at Jerusalem would crush the jihadist army, and the Muslims would sue for peace, with the status quo restored. And so, after a 16-year-long war, Jerusalem would once again be back in Christian hands. Now, after this, not too much would happen, but one big difference from our time as in 1683, the Ottomans would still besiege Vienna, but this time they would actually successfully take it and make it a vassal state. Now, a big reason the Ottomans weren't able to take Vienna in our timeline was because, they were seen as the Muslim threat, and so the Poles mainly, and a couple of other Christian states joined together with the Austrians to push them out. But with the Ottomans being seen as heretics but still Christians, the Christians would just not have that same kind of impetus to really fight against the Ottomans. Now, of course, one thing to remember is that Austria and the Austrian ruler was also the Holy Roman Emperor. And so because of this, with Austria now a vassal of the Ottomans, this would now leave the Holy Roman Emperor, this would now leave the Holy Roman Empire without an emperor. And so in this case, a close Catholic country that was strong enough to have some sort of power, in this case being Bavaria, would become the Holy Roman Emperor. So that is it for today. I know that's a pretty short one. I hope you are enjoying the scenario so far. Definitely don't forget to check out part 4 on Julius Caesar's channel, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.